Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 14 transfer plans. Game Week 13 is just finished. We know we're about to head into a very busy December period, and January will be quite the same after a New Year's break, but looking forward to making transfers, not having to wait too long, having the midweek fixtures being the Premier League games, and that's it really. So this week was a pretty tragic week for me. Solanke was ill. Son, I guess Son's just sunning. The rest of the team also just, full of blanks. Salah, Palmer, the only ones holding the team down. I did really want to go to Saka many weeks ago. I'm probably not going to whine too much about it. But sometimes in FPL, you have luxury transfers and you make certain moves. I think Son had a good game in hand. I knew so did Chris Wood. Instead of making Son to Saka as a move, I decided to go Chris Wood to João Pedro. Because both João Pedro and Saka were players that I really wanted to have in my team in the medium to long term. And I really didn't think there was too much splitting either the Wood fixture and the João Pedro fixture and the Son fixture versus the Saka fixture. But as it turns out, I've made the definite wrong moves when it comes to this game week and outcomes there. I think probably around 16 plus 7, 23 points down net. But that happens from time to time in FPL, and just going to have to accept it, and take it on the chin. So that's the game week. Flecken, I think he had a great game. Unfortunately, lost a clean sheet very, very early, but no complaints when it's someone like Buonanotte, who's been a really, really good quality player this season, particularly when you look at underlyings. The rest of the team was pretty dismaying. As I said, Solanke auto-subbed, Guardiola not even playing, Lewis featuring, but in a game that was pretty much not going to happen for Man City, I think, when you're facing potentially the best team in the world right now. So hats off to Liverpool. I didn't go for the Salah captaincy, and I went for Palmer instead. I guess I'm happy because I maybe got 1 point more than Salah. Maybe that's a win, if that counts. But it did make me very intrigued to get more into Liverpool in the future, specifically after that Newcastle game. And that's really it. That was the team. Very, very shocking. I don't think there's too much to review. Gabriel has an injury or a knock, but I think that will continue to be managed, hopefully, and he can start again in midweek. As far as Hall, I think he's played well. Losing the clean sheet was unfortunate. The decision between Hall and Colwell was actually quite tight, but I wanted to go for Hall because it gave me a little bit more flexibility and money in the bank. And I actually think that money in the bank and that flexibility is still going to save me, because it's going to allow me to go towards Saka this week from Son, hopefully, and then actually make my Game Week 15 move, which I think is quite crucial and actually something that I really, really like. As far as Dunk, it seems like he's back as well. We saw him come on late in the game. So he came on over Guardiola and Lewis. I didn't really mind the order of whatever players that I put in this game week because I was unsure about Dunk and Guardiola's minutes. Guardiola mostly because he made so many mistakes prior to the Liverpool game. And then Lewis ultimately just doesn't have the same level of goal threat as Guardiola. So I made those moves as I did. Obviously, as it turns out, Lewis did play for a short stint in a right wing type position. Not that it really worked out for City, mind you, because they were a really poor offense in the game. And Lewis was subbed off eventually anyways. But that's the team. I really wanted to jump into Fantasy Football Hub and just quickly show you what my plans are for the next few weeks ahead as we assess a couple players. I think Mbeumo is also one of those players that a lot of people are looking at now as very, very disappointing. And I think crucially, the thing that makes Mbeumo disappointing is actually his underlying stats, right? In open play, how effective has he been? Because he's taken some penalties this season, but when you take away those penalties, and XG, keep in mind, includes penalties, actually it looks much worse when I look at someone like Mbeumo. And I would think a lot of people do see him as a top tier pick. So when you compare it to a lot of the other players in the game, that quality just isn't there. It's actually closer towards some of the 5.x, 6.x midfielders within the game, Johnson included, because he's got such good underlying stats. Keep in mind, though, of course, he still is a penalty taker, still playing really good minutes, and his sort of open play, I guess, position can change a little bit. I think I remember this time last season, I made the exact same move out of Mbeumo when they actually had mediocre fixtures, and I went out of Mbeumo into Diaby because I was spotting the same issues, and I lived to sort of, suffer really from Mbeumo because he's generally a good pick. I think, yes, the season so far, as it's played out for Brentford, has not looked good for Mbeumo in open play, but I do think that's something that can change in the future. But he's also someone who's about to head into tougher fixtures, and I can see a lot of people wanting to make a move away from him, and that's totally fine. I think that's very acceptable. But anyways, let's just quickly jump into my transfer plans. So we're back here in Game Week 14 with the Fantasy Football Hub, my team pick and rating tool. This is a tool I use to, manage my own transfers, see what my team would be shaping up a future game weeks at a time, and also just looking at the game week rating every week just to make sure that I have a pretty well-balanced team over a horizon of games, usually 5 to 6 game weeks at a time, that sort of thing. So if you're interested in Fantasy Football Hub, any of the tools that they have that can actually help you advance in terms of gaining rank, improving up in your positions in mini leagues, have a look at the offer that they have right now, which will be in the link in bio. They have a free trial, I believe, for up to a month's time. So a great offer around Black Friday. Have a look at that if you're interested. Now, in my own team, Gameweek 14, I did go towards João Pedro, and I'm pretty happy with that move, to be quite honest. I do feel like Solanke is probably a question mark because of the illness, but I think hopefully with that just being an illness, he can play versus Bournemouth away. My pressing concern, I think, is really just missing out on one of the sort of blue chip assets within the game, which would definitely be Saka, with the way Arsenal have been playing with Odegaard and Rice coming back into the team, and overall the sort of cohesion being there, right? There's something missing with Spurs, whether it's good performances here, good performances there, and then huge misses. I just think that consistency from Arsenal's there when they actually have that full strength squad. So I'm just going to have to bite the bullet. And unfortunately, I've not gained anything really from going Saka to Son many game weeks ago. And that happens in FPL, right? You take a punt in a certain direction. I've seen Saka limping. I've seen Saka miss games. And somehow I've still net lost out massively with Son. And that's fine. I think just have to sort of hold your L's at times. And it's similar to the Haaland situation when we were trying to enjoy what should have been Halls, I guess, on paper versus Wolves and Southampton, and nothing was to be. So that's the fine. I'm planning to move Son to Saka. I think the move makes sense. I left enough money in the bank for it. And what's beautiful about this move is that it really does help me with my next game week move. So if I sort of lock in this move here, I think one question I probably want to ask is whether I want to bench someone like Mbumo and actually just play someone like Rodgers instead. That's something that I actually like to consider. But it also depends on little things like Emi Martinez's injury and how I feel about, Aston Villa as an example. It is a mirror matchup, to be honest. I have Flecken as well. So maybe I'm minded to bench Rodgers because I'm sort of, I guess, gaming a Brentford result. But for now, I think I'm pretty tempted to do that. I want to play Lewis over Hall 100%. I don't think there's a doubt in my mind there. I think Lewis should start versus Nottingham Forest. I might be wrong, but I'll take my chances. I think Nottingham Forest are a pretty ineffectual offense. Chris Wood did score, yes, but it was off the penalty, and that was his only shot within the game. So I'll take my chances. This fantasy defense has been awful, and I'm hoping that Guardiola will come off for this game and actually play instead, now that Ake's played like a full 90, really. And I'll sort of take that punt in that direction. And this will probably be my team. As I said, probably need to make a decision between, who to play between Mbumo, Cunha, Solanke, João Pedro, these sorts of players, because there's a bit of doubt with Solanke, but I think that, he's going to be an auto sub option. I don't really see Solanke being ill, making him someone who'd come off the bench. I think he's going to start if he's ready to play. If he's not ready to play, he doesn't play. And I think that's how I'm going to treat Solanke for this game week. Now, moving on, if I sort of set my team like so, moving on to game week 15, I think what's curious here is that I've actually got the option to clearly play Dunk over Lewis in this game week here, and maybe even play someone like Hall. But the key thing is I think keeping Mbumo is okay up until Newcastle at home, and then I can make a move around him. But crucially, if I optimize the team here anyways, what I would really like to do is Guardiola to Trent. And I'm assuming that Trent's going to get one price rise, but it says 0.0 in the bank. That's not necessarily true. If I move towards Saka at the end of tonight, which means that I'll catch this price rise, I should still have 0.1 in the bank for this move, unless Guardiola drops in price, at which point that it will truly be a 0.0 move, and probably will be a 0.0 move. So that's it, really. Planning to go into Trent, planning to go out of Guardiola in game week 15, and hopefully I've got enough time to be able to make that move, because I really like the just owning Trent, really, because I just think he's looked brilliant, especially within that City match. Things can change. When we looked at the underlying stats for Trent this season, they haven't been super impressive, but I think the team as it stands right now looks really good, and Mbumo is still a pretty decent own on a game week like this. I probably would actually play Rodgers, if I'm being honest, over someone like Cunha or João Pedro. I think I'd probably bench Cunha right now. Maybe I'd bench Mbumo once again, but I don't think I'm going to do that. So that's probably what I'm going to do. And then in game week 16, the question mark here is going to be, what do I do with someone like Mbumo? Do I actually end up holding him over this run because I have confidence in him? Or do I just generally see that Mbumo is a little bit of a spoiled asset? Is there anyone that I can move on to around that period? And I think one of the interesting questions with Mbumo and unfortunate things is that ultimately this run of games is extremely mediocre for a lot of the midfielders, because we're sort of not given, I guess, a lot of good options within the game. Like, for example, Eze, who I would still be interested in, as you guys know, but might laugh at. He's someone who's available there, but I'm tapped out of Odegaard, and Brennan Johnson's probably the only other player that I'd be really considering around this time, or maybe someone like Anthony Gordon, but he's also, I think, suffering from less minutes when it comes to Wilson coming back. But being in the team and things like that. So I'm actually tempted right now to probably play it out as it is. Obviously, I'd play Cunha here in the situation, bench someone like Rodgers, and I think I could actually roll in this game week here if I'm willing to stomach the idea of keeping Mbumo. But as I said, there are some alternative options. If I bin Mbumo, the solver here suggests players like Eze, players like Semenyo and Kulusevski. I think I'm not so keen on Kulusevski. I still think it'd be Brennan Johnson for me, and I think he's interesting, but we do know that his minutes can be a bit susceptible. Although I was so certain that Kulusevski was going to play in the match versus Fulham, but as it turns out, he was finally given his rest after playing so many fixtures in a row for Tottenham. And you can say he's a very quintessential player, but it's clear that sports science is also a thing that I think Spurs do practice. So that's interesting. So I think I'd probably keep Mbumo for now. And then on Game Week 17, there's some interesting decisions, because on Game Week 17, what I would say is that we need to plan for what we think is going to be the most interesting sort of scenario with Man United, right? How good are they as a team? Is Mazraoui, is Ahmad, is Rashford even all the types of picks that we can consider? Because I could see myself, instead of, let's say, shipping off someone like Mbumo, I could maybe think about how I'd like to play around the Rodgers pick within my team. And maybe that's a combination of two moves, right? Maybe I can go out of Solanke after rolling. I can move out of Solanke and Rodgers here to move into maybe another cheap forward, and then actually someone in the midfield who might be coming from this United team. So I think Game Week 17 is probably the window that I'm now most looking forward to actually owning 2 or 3 free transfers in a row, just so that it allows me to be able to make these kind of moves. Because I do think that there is a tipping point here where there's a pretty nice swing for United. We know that City are also about to embark on a swing. I'm pretty invested into City. I, at this point, obviously would have sold Guardiola if I choose to go for the transfer plan, but it gives me options, right? This whole idea of keeping Mbumo up until then, even Mbumo with a home fixture here isn't too bad. So the question is going to be players like Solanke, do I want to keep him, and etc. Another thing too with Cunha is ultimately we know that the run kind of dries up after this game week and Game Week 17. So another thing to think about is, are there any big forwards in the game that we still care about outside of maybe Jackson? Because Isak, we don't know what's going on with his injury. I think it's a contact injury, so it should be fine. But do I really want to spend that much money to get towards Isak at around Game Week 17? Unsure. So that's something that I definitely want to think about later down the line. And for now, I think I'm pretty set on making the 2 free transfers that I've suggested that I'll be making back to back. So Son to Saka, crucially on this game week, locking in that as a move. And then on Game Week 15 here, moving Guardiola to Trent as long as everything goes to plan. So that's sort of my general plan. It's kind of looking at, how poor City have been as a team, generally speaking, but I do think that it'll help my team in the future. And ultimately, we are, dealing with, I guess, a big shift in terms of team strengths, right? Arsenal look absolutely brilliant on both ends of the pitch, finally, right? With Odegaard coming back, with Rice being fully fit. And the impact of that is, unfortunately, City just look really bad on defense still, but there's a bit of a creep on offense. As far as Liverpool, they just look great all around the pitch. I don't think there's really any complaints you can make against this Liverpool team. Newcastle, we've seen some pretty hideous performances, honestly, since I bought into Hull. Chelsea, though, looking pretty good for the most part, right? Even that goal that they conceded versus Leicester, I think was a bit unfortunate, given that it was a last-minute penalty. Most of their sort of performances on both ends of the pitch have been quite good. So I suppose the question mark is going to be, if I wait a little bit too long to not move Solanke out of my team, am I missing out on maybe a great run from Jackson, that sort of thing? But we know that Chelsea's fixture run really does extend for quite a while. So when I look at someone like Solanke, and I look at moving out of him, there's many options when it comes to, let's say, Jackson's fixture run, as long as I'm able to sort of lose a little bit of money from Rodgers or even someone like Mbumo. And generally, if I jump from Game Week 17, I still have Everton, Fulham, Ipswich, Crystal Palace, and we know great fixtures up until Game Week 23. So it's not too late, in my opinion, to go into Jackson. And it's a nice time to reconsider, since Solanke has a Liverpool game. And Mbumo has a slightly tougher game in Nottingham Forest. I think Nottingham Forest have played almost every team this season quite well on defense, right? There's not been any bad performances outside of the Newcastle one where they got thrashed. So I do think that Game Week 17 is a nice point to reset my thoughts on team strengths, the game, move into some pretty big fixture swings around then. So those are my thoughts in terms of my team selection. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.